After 20 years of marriage, I uncovered a shocking secret through my wife's best friend. She had been cheating all along. That was the moment I knew everything had to end. The evening had started like any other reunion, filled with laughter and fond memories shared among old friends. But as I sat there, listening to my wife reminisce about our high school days, something felt off. She casually mentioned how we met in high school, leaving out the crucial detail that we had actually been dating back then. It wasn't the first time she had downplayed our history, but tonight, it felt different. One of her old roommates remarked how remarkable it was that we had been through so much together, yet here we were, still standing strong. I joked, trying to lighten the mood, but when her roommate began to share a story about us, my wife abruptly cut her off. The tension in the room was palpable, and my senses tingled with unease. There was something she wasn't saying. My heart raced, and I knew then that I couldn't just ignore the gut feeling creeping over me. I had to confront her. As we left that night, I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a casual slip of memory, but a sign of something far deeper. I needed to know the truth, and nothing would stop me from finding out. The unease I felt that night only grew stronger as we drove home. The casual dismissal from my wife, brushing off my questions, sent waves of frustration and suspicion through me. She acted like it wasn't a big deal, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't let it go. It was as if her nonchalant attitude was a slap in the face, like my feelings didn't matter. I told her I needed answers, and when she insisted it wasn't important, I knew I couldn't just let it slide. That's when I made up my mind. I told her I was going to stay at my brother's house until she was ready to tell me the truth. I needed space to think, to breathe, because the anger bubbling inside me was too much to contain. The next day, she came over, her face pale and anxious, and I could see the guilt in her eyes before she even spoke. I pressed her, refusing to back down, and finally, she admitted it. She had slept with several men during those first 2 years of college, while we were in a long-distance relationship. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She downplayed it, trying to minimize her actions, but the damage had already been done. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, anger, sadness, all swirling inside me. The woman I had trusted, the one I had shared my life with, had been with other men. How could I have been so blind? My heart shattered as she continued to list the names, the men I had even met as friends. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern of lies, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The weight of her confession was too much. I knew then, with crushing certainty, that I couldn't continue living this lie. The moment she admitted to sleeping with over 10 different men during our long-distance years, a flood of emotions crashed over me. My chest tightened, and I could hardly breathe as she continued to downplay it, as if this monumental betrayal meant nothing. But to me, it was everything. The pain was suffocating, like a vice grip around my heart. I tried to hold it together, but the anger and disbelief kept rising like a tidal wave, threatening to break me. My mind raced. How could she have done this? How could she look me in the eyes and pretend like it was insignificant? And then, the worst part, she had introduced me to some of these men. She had brought them into our lives as friends, all the while knowing what they had shared. Each name she mentioned felt like a dagger, each revelation more damning than the last. I felt like I was losing control of everything. My world, the world I had spent 20 years building, was crumbling in front of me. I pressed her for more details, needing to understand how deep this betrayal really went. The more she confessed, the more it became clear this wasn't just a moment of weakness. It was a pattern. The anger inside me was no longer something I could contain. It boiled over, mixing with the overwhelming sadness. This wasn't a mistake I could forgive, not after everything she had done. She was still trying to minimize it, still trying to twist the truth. But deep down, I knew that this marriage, this life we'd built, had been shattered beyond repair. The decision to leave had never felt clearer. I stood there, staring at her, and for the first time in 2 decades, I didn't recognize the woman in front of me. The lies, the manipulation, the sheer disrespect, it was all too much to process. How could she be so casual about something so catastrophic? She was still trying to justify her actions, insisting that it didn't matter because we were long distance, as if that somehow made her betrayals less painful. My body trembled with a mix of fury and disbelief. I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat, trapped by the crushing weight of betrayal. Every single memory we had, every milestone we celebrated, felt tainted now. How could I ever look at her the same way again? I could hear the voices of my family in the back of my mind, urging me to forgive, to overlook these mistakes for the sake of our history together. But how could I? This wasn't about a few slip-ups or fleeting moments of weakness. It was about years of deceit, years of her being unfaithful right under my nose. The realization was a punch to the gut. My heart was torn between the man I loved and the stranger she had become. The anger surged again, and I could feel my pulse in my ears. I couldn't live this lie any longer. I wasn't just fighting for the truth, I was fighting for my own sanity. I told her I wanted a divorce, that I would start the paperwork as soon as possible. Her face twisted, and for the first time, I saw something resembling remorse in her eyes. But it was too little, too late. Her attempts to downplay everything, to make me believe it was all in the past, only made it worse. The damage had been done. There was no coming back from this. This marriage was over. As the days went on, the pressure from our families became unbearable. They all insisted I was overreacting, that I should forgive her for the sake of our long history together. But every word they spoke only deepened the chasm between us. They didn't understand. How could they? They hadn't been the ones betrayed. They hadn't felt the weight of 20 years of trust come crashing down in a single moment. Every attempt to minimize her actions, to brush off the significance of what she had done, made me feel more isolated. I wasn't just fighting for the end of a marriage, I was fighting for my dignity. I kept hearing my wife's voice in my head, still trying to explain away the unexplainable. "It was just a phase," she said. "It didn't mean anything." But how could I ignore the truth staring me in the face? How could I pretend it didn't hurt, knowing that she had shared herself with multiple men, even introducing some of them to me as friends? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about infidelity, it was about a complete lack of respect. And that, more than anything, was what I couldn't overlook. I had to end it. There was no other choice. The voices of family and friends echoed in my mind, each one urging me to forgive, to overlook the past and move forward. "Everyone makes mistakes," they said. "You've built so much together. Think of the years, the children." But how could I? How could I ignore what had been done to me, to us? They didn't understand the depth of my pain. They hadn't felt the sting of betrayal the way I had. Every word they spoke felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. The weight of their expectations, their insistence that I was being unreasonable, was suffocating. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind or if they were all blind to the truth. I felt like I was being gaslit, as though everyone around me was trying to convince me that my feelings weren't valid, that I was making too much of it. My own wife, the woman I had spent 2 decades with, was minimizing the damage she had done. She brushed it off like it was nothing, like I should just forget and move on. But how could I? Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies. I saw the betrayal. I couldn't erase the image of her introducing those men into our lives, smiling, pretending everything was fine, while hiding the truth behind her eyes. My mind was in turmoil. The world felt like it was spinning out of control, and I was stuck in the middle, questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was I the one in the wrong for wanting to protect myself, for wanting to end this toxic relationship? But deep down, I knew I wasn't the one who had broken news, it was her. And the decision to leave, to move on, became clearer with each passing moment. I couldn't stay in this prison of lies any longer. I couldn't shake the suffocating feeling in my chest, the constant ache of betrayal that gnawed at me day and night. Despite what I wanted to believe, nothing felt the same anymore. It wasn't just the affair, it was the years of lies, the manipulation, the emotional distance she had created without even realizing it. I had given her everything: my love, my trust, my loyalty, and, in return, I had been left with nothing but shattered memories and a heart full of unanswered questions. How could I look at her the same way? How could I even pretend that we could go back to what we once had? Each day felt like I was drowning in the weight of it all. I kept replaying every conversation, every moment, wondering where I went wrong. Did I miss the signs? Could I have done something differently? But even as I tried to make sense of it, the truth was clear. She had betrayed me. And that betrayal wasn't something I could forget, no matter how hard I tried. The thought of leaving her, of walking away from the life we had built, terrified me. But it was the only way forward. I couldn't continue living a lie. The emotional toll had already been too much. She hadn't just broken my trust, she had broken me. I knew I had to leave, even though it felt like I was losing a part of myself. The decision was made, but it didn't make it any easier. My heart was heavy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. This was my breaking point. There was no going back now. The finality of it hit me like a tidal wave. I had made the decision to leave, but the weight of that choice seemed to crush me with every step I took. The house, once filled with memories of laughter and shared dreams, now felt like a prison. I packed up my things with a heavy heart, knowing that this was the end of a chapter I never imagined would come to this. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sadness as I realized that the life I had built with her everything I thought we had was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. As I stood in the empty room, the echo of our past seemed to surround me, taunting me with what could have been. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't live in the shadow of betrayal, in the constant reminder of her deceit. I needed to move on, to rebuild, to find a sense of peace that had been stripped from me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was doing the right thing. I wasn't just walking away from her, I was walking toward my own healing, my own future. I had no idea what life would look like without her, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep living in the past. It was time to finally let go, to start fresh, to take back control of my life. The divorce wasn't just a legal step, it was my liberation. The hardest part was over, and now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again.